संस्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्. We are resuming our class on the Vivekachudamani. Welcome all of you. Welcome back after a short interval. And in future I shall try to avoid skipping the classes and try to continue the class during my travels, which is not always very easy. So a few words about this text that we have been discussing for the last maybe less than a week. It is called the Vivekachudamani, which you find in the English translation. It's called the Crest Jewel of Wisdom. Now, it is one of the primers or introductory works to Advaita Vedanta. There are many works which can be called introductory works or preparatory works to Advaita Vedanta. There are certain books which are much shorter, like Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha, Drisya Viveka, and so on, which are very small, tiny booklets. And there are much bigger introductory works like Panchadesi and so on, which are somewhat more comprehensive. But this is the first really comprehensive introduction, which is not large like Panchadesi, but much more comprehensive, much more elaborate than Tattva Bodha and Atma Bodha. And this contains not only the essence of Advaita philosophy, but also certain fundamental principles related to India's spiritual heritage. And during the last session, we were discussing the 4 fundamental qualifications, characteristics for any spiritual seeker. Put in a simple language, suppose you're walking in the street, FILBERT Street or Webster Street, depending on your choice. If you hear a board here, some discussion on Vedanta, higher philosophy or spirituality, if we feel a compulsion, if we desire to enter this hall and then listen to this talk, your mind should be ready. Your mind should have acquired certain characteristics and qualifications. Then only you will feel an attraction, even instinct to enter this place. Again, after coming to this place, after listening for some time, and then feeling like coming again, or going back home and taking a book from the library, a copy of Vivekachudamani, and want to know more about this book, you will require certain inherited spiritual qualifications. And Vedanta tells you these characteristics and qualifications may be coming from previous life cycles. So, in this verse, which is the 18th or 19th verse, it continues for some verses. There's a very elaborate discussion on what is called sadhana chadushtayam. Chadushtayam means a quadrant, a collection of 4. Sadhana means methods, practices, disciplines, different ways of practicing some spiritual disciplines. We already had a brief discussion and we'll continue with this discussion. So, sadhanani atra pachatvari kadhidani manishi bhihi yeshu satsuveva sannishta yadabhave na siddhyati. So, the verse tells us that 4 qualifications are stated, 4 characteristics are stated as essential for any spiritual seeker. For any person who wants to think beyond the world of enjoyments and pleasures, the world of checkbooks and fountain pens and stock markets, the world beyond what we normally enjoy, you need to have certain qualifications. And in the 19th verse, which we just started, the discussion begins, Adu Nitya Anitya Vastu Vivekaha. So you can see that the title of this book is mentioned here, Vivekaha. Viveka means discerning wisdom. This is right for me, this is not right for me. At the beginning, we may need a book to tell us what is right for us. But gradually, as we practice spiritual qualities, spiritual disciplines, this wisdom becomes part of our instinct. So we start instinctively choosing certain things and avoiding certain things. So how to begin to train our mind to decide what is right for us and what is not right for us. So the first qualification, Adu means at the very beginning. Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka means a discerning wisdom to choose between what is Nitya, what is Anitya. These are Sanskrit terms. Nitya literally means eternal, everlasting, remaining for all time. Let's say what really matters. That could be another way of really understanding. Eternal, immortal, beyond lifetime and causation. This may be highly bombastic philosophical terminology, but in simple language, what it means, what really matters. And our understanding of what really matters depends upon our own growth and evolution. Frequently we mention a small child may think a candy is what really matters. When he grows up, gets a degree, and a job is what really matters. And even beyond that, something else can be what really matters. So, but when we evolve and grow in a different direction, in the direction of spirituality or spiritual growing up, then our conception of what really matters begins to change. Is there something beyond what I see around? Does life have a meaning other than just healthy physical life, money and status and enjoyments? What's the meaning of, what's the goal of human existence? This question doesn't come to everyone. But if we can somehow ask this question to ourselves, surprisingly many of our problems of this world will be solved, can be solved. This may appear to be very strange. Philosophy can solve your problems in this world. It's a fact. When we can think, let's say, there is something beyond all this, something transcendental. Not that you are becoming the transcendental, not that you are becoming Buddha. You don't have to be a Buddha to look at the world as a whole with maturity. When we think, well, there is something beyond all this, this is okay. We need job, we need health, we need status, we need a good money. All these are really necessary. Vedanta doesn't negate the reality of life in this world. Vedanta is not a life-negating philosophy, but Vedanta tells you how to live in this world in a more intelligent manner. And that higher intelligence is the understanding that money alone cannot bring us anything lasting, cannot bring us eternal peace or happiness or contentment. That realization makes us think, well, what is then beyond that? And that beyond is Nitya. This is Nitya. So, Nitya literally means eternal. It means transcendental. Something you may call it trans-empirical, maybe especially in Kantian philosophy, the noumenal, phenomenal. You find something that is beyond the empirical. So that is Nitya. Anitya is the opposite of it. Everything else is Anitya. Not absolutely unreal, but not absolutely real. That's the real meaning of Anitya. A literal meaning is that which is not eternal. It doesn't mean unreal. So frequently, we have to be careful about the translation, translation always a problem. Especially in philosophy, you take any translation, you find real, unreal. The discrimination between real and unreal, that can be disastrous unless you understand the real meaning. Discrimination here means discerning wisdom, not discrimination as understood in American political history or tradition, not at all. Discrimination means discerning wisdom. Say, a child who refuses to go to kindergarten would like to play. You tell him, no, you have to study now, but you can play later. If the child understands that, that is discerning wisdom. The most infantile stage, so to speak. So, that discerning wisdom is the first stage. The Ado, Nitya, Anitya, Vastu, Viveka. That's a beginning of spiritual evolution. In any tradition, not only in Vedanta or Hinduism, in any tradition you find, why should a man start, tomorrow onwards next week I shall go to church or synagogue, place of Buddhism, anywhere for a temple. Why should you don't, by going to a church, you don't earn money, you don't get $100,000 extra. But why should I waste my time? Because you see, by doing that, any tradition, but just an example, you are perhaps thinking of something beyond money, status, and things like that. So that higher transcendental outlook is Nitya. Once we have this transcendental outlook, the ability to look beyond, to see beyond the empirical, then the empirical worldly life itself becomes somewhat easier. That's what really happens. Suppose a doctor sends you, unfortunately, God forbid, sends you a report that you have some serious illness, health problem. Suppose you can tell yourself, I have this problem, I have to undergo treatment, but body is not eternal. Body is not going to remain in this world for all times. Now this transcendental wisdom will help you in coping with the anxieties and worries of illness. Illness doesn't go away, you have to undergo treatment. But then the unnecessary worries and anxieties can be avoided when you understand what is obvious to everyone, but frequently what we forget all the time, that this body is not eternal. So that is the meaning of Nitya. In the higher sense, in Vedanta, it means Atman, Brahman alone is real, everything else is unreal. Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya, Jivo Brahma na aparaha. Jivo Brahma eva na aparaha. So Brahman is only reality, the Jagat is Mithya. Mithya doesn't mean non-existent. Mithya means that something comes and goes, non-eternal. And once you understand this properly, the next qualification, Iha amutra phala bhoga viragaha. Iha means in this world, amutra means elsewhere, beyond. Phala bhoga viraga means absolute, a sense of renunciation or detachment or non-attachment towards any kind of enjoyments and pleasures. Tad anandaram, that comes later. So the first step is, this is fine, this is what really matters, that is somewhat relative, I don't have to worry about it. Even in our everyday life, we can see, this is called prioritization. This can be done. And a kind of spiritual prioritization means you think of there is something transcendental, something eternal. Compared to that, everything in this world is relative. So now remember, it is not a philosophy. It's a real fact. It can be proved even in the light of modern physics. But then it is a great spiritual truth. The problem is we understand intellectually, but we may not remember it all the time. So in this in the same text, if you take the 326th verse, those of you have got the book, 326th verses, it gives a very graphic description of how and why we forget this obvious truth. Now remember, there are slight differences with regard to the numbering of the verses, because this text has got 2-3 versions in printed versions. Sometime it could be 327 or 325, it could be slightly different. The verse is Lakshachudam che yadi chittameshat bahirmukham san nibade tadastataha pramadada prachuda kelikantukaha sopana pankto patito yatha tatha. This is, so we have got an index, you can see Lakshachudam, that's what it means. So here is an imagery, a very wonderful imagery. Now, somebody or a child is playing with a ball. You think of a staircase, and a child is playing with a ball. He is standing on the top layer of the staircase. Somehow the ball falls from his hands, and then it hits the top step. So one after another, step by step, the ball gradually falls down. It won't stop till it reaches the rock bottom, the ground. Lakshachudam means that ball has lost sight of its goal. It slips from his hands. And then tatasthataka means gradually 1, 2, 3 like that. Step by step, the ball falls down. What happens, Sopana pankto padito yathadatha. So it falls down the staircase. Like that, in our life, when we forget that there is this Nitya or eternal reality, the absolute reality, and everything else is non-eternal. When we forget this, what happens is, we go after, our mind goes after worldly things. And our mind slips like the ball that slips through the fingers of the child. Our mind also slips. It can happen when you are sitting in your room, you use internet, you see a YouTube video, that can be debating a terrible disaster, because mind goes after something. So frequently what happens is, our mind goes after what already it has acquired. Our desire very often depends upon what we already have acquired. Suppose a very greedy man thinking always about money, maybe very rich, he'll be always thinking about how to make more money. And that is just one instance, one example. There can be any number of examples. So what happens is, the slightest error, the smallest error, can be the beginning of a disastrous journey in spiritual life. You may have heard of many stories, many instances. Many great saints had a sudden opening in their life and sudden transformation, and they became great mystics and saints. And also many great mystics had a sudden fall, and again in Vedanta and Buddhism they had to wait several life cycles to again catch up with their spiritual evolution. So this happens. So that's why this is a great warning. In fact, Patanjali has a much more elaborate and much more precise way of explaining this. Patanjali, the great Yoga Sutra, the teacher of Yoga Sutra. He calls them antarayas. Antaraya means obstacles. Obstacles are manifold. So, Of course, if you are interested, you can see the verse. It comes in the 30th Sutra of Samadhipada. Vyadhi, Sthana, Samsaya, Pramada, Alasya, Aviradi, Bhranti Darshana, Aladhabhumigatvam, Anavasthitatvam, Anavasthitattvani, Antaraya. Antaraya means obstacles, internal and external obstacles. It could be doubt, it could be indecision, it could be laziness, it could be some kind of, when you are prone to making mistakes, all these can be different kinds of obstacles and setbacks in spiritual life. So, there's a warning here. Lakshachudam cheyadi chittamedat. Chitta means mind. Mind may suddenly slip out of our control. And this, I think, maybe there is no better example, better illustration to this phenomenon than many of the modern problems we are facing today. So drug addiction, it can be the internet addiction, which can even lead to, you can hear many of these to the terrorists, they were attracted towards doing terrible things by watching the social media, and you start a spiritual journey downward, and that's the end of the journey, destruction. So the author Shankaracharya says we have to be very alert. It doesn't mean that we have to keep watching our mind, every thought, every word. It's not possible. Psychologically, physically, we cannot go on watching. You cannot make a GPS system, what I'm going to think next moment, impossible. What I'm going to do next moment, not always possible. Only in the broad line planning is possible. But one way, one way of restraining and directing our mind along the right path is laid down here in this book. Have some higher goal in life, something transcendental, something higher than empirical, something not of this, something which is not worldly. Along with all other responsibilities and duties and obligations related to a profession or social status, responsibilities, and so on. Along with that, we should have some higher goal, higher sense of purpose in life, other than worldly enjoyments. That sense of higher goal will help us to organize our energies, our thoughts and activities and actions in one direction. And that can help us, prevent us from falling into the pit, falling into this dangerous path. That's why this is called Nitya, Anitya, Vastu, Veka. That's the first step. It means a sense of higher purpose in life. Something higher than worldly enjoyments. So, when this happens, naturally, Ikha Amutra Phala Bhoga Viraga, then we naturally will have an inclination to look for some higher purpose in life, and in direct proportion to that, we may feel kind of detachment towards worldly things. Phala Bhoga Viraga. And when this happens, the third qualification comes naturally. Samadhi, Sarka, Sambhati. The 6 qualifications. Internal discipline, external discipline, a sense of purpose, concentration for higher goal, contentment, all these are stated here as 6 essential qualifications. We already discussed this earlier. So I am not repeating, you can see the previous classes, previous videos. And the last one is Mumukshutvam. Mumukshutvam is linked to the first one. That's why the 4th qualification and the first qualification are interrelated. When we have this idea of what really matters, Nitya, the eternal, some transcendental spiritual goal and purpose in life, then we'll have a desire to achieve that. And it's called mumukshutvam. Mumukshutvam literally means moktum icha mumukshuta, it means. I mean a desire for spiritual liberation. It could be anything in any religious tradition. In any religious tradition that tells you the purpose of human life is not physical enjoyments, worldly enjoyments. It is something beyond. And along with that, we also become better human beings, and that's very important. Somehow reaching heaven, that may not be enough because people do terrible things to reach heaven. You can see the absolutely horrendous things people do. The only purpose to reach heaven. It's far better to take a permanent residential address in hell than going to that kind of heaven. But the real purpose, the real meaning of this higher purpose or mumukshutvam or moktam icha is we should become better human beings. We should become more compassionate, more humane, more spiritual, more understanding with our fellow human beings. That's why the third set of 6 qualifications is very important. That is Shama, Dama, Uparadi, Tidiksha, Siddha, Samadhanam. We discussed this very, very elaborately, but I shall just run through some of those ideas briefly because it will be, I think I discussed almost twice, but but this is very important. A desire to go to heaven is not enough because our concept of heaven could be much worse than in this world actually. Really. Our concept of God can be much worse than devil himself. Many ideas of God can make you do terrible things. Man can make us much worse human beings. That's why, see, Shama, Dama, Uparadi, Tidiksha, Shraddha, Samadhanam. That's why. Now here I shall just give a brief description of this Shama, Dama. Shama Virajya Vishaya Vrada. 22nd verse, if you can. Virajya Vishaya Vrada Dosha Drishtya Muhur Muhu Sulakshe Niyadavastha Manasas Shama Uchyade. So, taking the mind away, withdrawing the mind away from worldly objects and keeping the mind focused on this higher purpose, higher spiritual goal, Atman. That is Shama. Dhamma is not very different. Our senses, jnanendriyas and karmendriyas, means senses of perception, sense of action should be withdrawn and should be focused on the spiritual, ultimate spiritual goal. And then again, the third uparadi, bahya analambanam vrittehe, esha uparadi ruttama, there is a single word, so bahya analambanam, that means our mind should not be running about, being drawn by external objects, by our desires. The mind should be withdrawn from this world, the world of enjoyments and attractions, should be focused on some higher spiritual purpose. Remember, when we do this, the first thing that happens is we become better human beings. That's very important. So this third set of qualifications has got 6 elements in it. Together, they are designed to make us broad-minded, compassionate, contented, so that we look upon our fellow human beings, fellow living beings, not the entire creation, with compassion and understanding. We cannot do any harm to anyone or to anything. So that is the importance of this third set of qualifications. And then Tidiksha, that is the fourth, that is Sahanam Sarva Dukkhanam Apradigara Purvakam Chinda Vilaprahidam Sa Tidiksha Nigatide. A sense of forbearance. You may have seen this if you read, because I want to draw examples, parallels from non-Vedantic or non-Hindu tradition. The Christian tradition, you find many mystics, Christian Jewish traditions. Great mystics. Many of them got only post-mortem recognition. But they were canonized. They had to go through a lot of difficulties. Even somebody like Saint Teresa of Avila, who reformed the Carmelite convent movement. And you can find many, many great saints, Buddhist monks, the great teachers like Tulsidas, many, many Hindu saints, Buddhist saints, Jewish mystics. See, they had to go through some difficult situations in their life. But they could forbear all these without any complaint. Apratigara means without any bitterness, without any sense of revenge, without any feeling of bitterness or anger. Silently, they could forbear all these difficulties. That quality, again, it is not created artificially. It gradually develops in our mind when we begin by putting our mind on some higher spiritual purpose in our life. That's why Nitya Nitya Vastu Veka. When we can think of life with a higher purpose beyond the empirical, life has a higher meaning. Then only life is worth living. Everything is, worldly enjoyments are necessary. Worldly pleasures may be part of human existence. But they should not constitute the only purpose of human existence. Along with that, life has got a higher meaning. When you realize all these things are Anitya or non-eternal, then we start thinking of some higher transcendental reality. When we begin our journey with that higher purpose, then this titiksha, the ability to silently forbear difficulties and difficult situations and challenges, that becomes natural. Because when we react, we are slowing down our spiritual journey. When we don't react violently to difficult situations but forbear silently, then we are growing faster. Because every expression of anger, hostility, is a waste of spiritual energy, mental energy. So when you become angry, we are losing mental energy, physical energy. And the next one is Shastrasya Guruvakesya Nitya Buddhya Avadharana Sa Shraddha Kadida Sadbhiya Vastu. Shraddha. Shraddha is literally, in this verse, if you read, some strong faith and teachings of Guru. So, Shastrasya Guruvakesya Satya Buddhya Avadharana. When you read scripture, when you listen to a teacher, you should have a strong conviction. It's a fact, it's real, true. But in real life, it also means bringing a sense of sanctity and sacredness to what we do, what we believe in. This is very, very important. A sense of sanctity and sacredness. When we read a book, when we listen to spiritual ideas, paying full attention with the full conviction that it is something sacred, something important. Because our understanding, even intellectual understanding of what we read, depends upon the amount of sanctity and sacredness that we attach to what we read. When we listen to something, in a casual way we can listen, but it doesn't have much effect. But when we are fully convinced that this is something sacred, this is something profound, it has got a spiritual significance in our life, with this conviction when you read, then it will have greater impact. This is true in any tradition, whether it's prayer, spiritual classics, listening to spiritual music. When we attach a sense of sanctity and sacredness, that brings in a special kind of concentration, and it will have a direct influence on our mind. That is called Shraddha. Shraddha literally means astikya buddhi. Asti buddhi. It is a fact. It is there. But that conviction should be accompanied by a sense of sanctity and sacredness. I can give an example. Suppose you are reading Bhagavad Gita. Depending upon whatever tradition we belong to, we read it casually with somehow something. Well, we may not take it very seriously. And I can give one example from history. You know why this Vedanta was, and how this Vedanta was preserved. The four Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda and Atharva Veda. 4 Vedas. These Vedas were preserved not by university professors, not by academics. No, for the last 5,000, 6,000 years. You find if you go to some Indian villages, people used to take bath early in the morning, 3 o'clock, 3:30. Then they read this. Many of them, when they were young, when they were children, they are asked to memorize this, very often without understanding the meaning, actually. They memorize this without understanding the meaning, they are very small. But they had a conviction that this is something sacred. So they were reading and memorizing without understanding the meaning, but with the full conviction that this is something sacred and profound, something life-changing. Later they may have studied with meaning, interpretation, commentaries and so on, becoming scholars. No, but you cannot memorize this after about 12th, 13th year, you cannot memorize this. Because this word formation of Vedic literature, it can only be imbibed. It cannot be memorized. If you don't understand the meaning, it don't stick to the mind. Only when you are very small, then only you'll be able to retain the sound system, the Hrasadirgha Pula Pruda and all that you find different ways of chanting. That's how they memorize. Now, without a sense of sanctity and sacredness, nobody will be able to memorize this. Nobody will be able to go through this grueling, this the austerity of getting up in the morning and studying for hours. But I think it's totally meaningless to memorize something without understanding meaning. But then, that has preserved what we are discussing now. This Shankaracharya himself, he studied all the 4 Vedas before he was 6-year-old, or even earlier. And you can imagine, he quotes from Mahabharata. He was not carrying a library with him. He was traveling all over India 4 times, from the extreme southern tip of India to Badrinath in the Indo-China border, extreme eastern part of today's Burma, up to Afghanistan. He was traveling 4 times. And he quotes from Mahabharata, he quotes from all available scriptures he quotes. And he lived only for 32 years. Obviously, he was not carrying a huge library with him. Walking in 8th century through forests and mountains and rivers and valleys and so on. Now, how could they do that? They memorized. How could they memorize? Not, let me see the meaning of this word, then only I will study the next meaning. You don't study that way. So a sense of sanctity and sacredness, one may call it superstition, okay, fine. But that superstition preserved a precious spiritual civilizational philosophy, something that preserved Indian culture. So that's why Shraddha is very important. Shraddha is an internal quality that comes to us naturally as we evolve in spiritual life. This is true in any tradition, either in the Dominican or Franciscan tradition or any of the tradition of Christian mystical tradition, Shraddha is what really enabled all these great mystics to go through difficult trials and situations. So, And then next one is samadhanam sammik asthavanam buddhehi suddhe brahmani sarvada ta samadhanam ityuktam natu chittasya lalanam. So again, keeping the mind on the higher spiritual truth without allowing the mind to be pampered by external objects. And before all that, one great teaching is given here in the 16th verse, those who are interested. We will conclude the sadhana sadhushtayam with this today's class. But before beginning this discussion, the author makes a very profound statement, and that's found in the 16th verse. And there he is defining as to who is the fit person, who is spiritually fit to enter spiritual life, to read the scriptures. Medhavi purusho vidwan uha apoha vijakshanaha adhikari atma vidyayam ukta lakshana lakshitaha. 16th. What it means is, who is adhikari? Adhikari means the person who is spiritually fit, spiritual fitness. It's a definition of spiritual fitness for studying higher scriptures. It may be Bible, it may be Dhammapada, it may be Torah, it may anything for the matter. Whatever spiritual books you are reading, this is the fitness. Medhavi purusho vidwan uha apoha vijakshanaha. First of all, the person should have the ability to study and retain his mind, whatever he studies. And then he should have two important qualifications. One is uha, the other is apoha. Uha apoha vijakshanaha. Vichakshana means an expert. Uha means the ability to accept what is to be accepted. Apoha is the opposite. The ability to reject what is to be rejected. Now, whatever we study, whatever we listen to, when we are convinced that it is true, we should be able to imbibe it, accept it. The sense of discerning wisdom, that is uha. And simultaneously, we should be able to filter out what is opposed to spiritual logic, this idea behind. If we can apply this, many of the problems that go in the name of religion in today's world can be avoided. What is opposed to humanistic values, universal values, spiritual values, values of like compassion, kindness and goodness should be rejected, and what is conducive, agreeable to humanism, spirituality should be accepted. That's why at the very beginning, the author is a very rational person. He doesn't ask us to blindly believe in anything. He says one should be able to accept what is to be accepted, what is universal, what is conducive to developing spiritual qualities, and the rest should be rejected. That is uha and apoha. Two qualifications mentioned. Now you can have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions. Thank you.
We have working microphone now. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Maharaj, from your travels.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. My question has to do with the much is said about this text, that it has strong Buddhist elements, and some of the English translations are evaluated as to how well they develop those Buddhist elements in the translation or not. And we can also imagine from the date of the text that it's also got strong components of Jewish and Christian ethical tradition, is it more useful to just see the text as having its universal qualities that are derived from the Vedas themselves? Is it more useful to think of it that way?
Yeah, this text puts together a lot of very useful fundamental ideas of Vedanta philosophy and also Vedantic way of life. So Buddhist influence, the last great Buddhist work goes back to 6th century AD. It is called Dharmapala's Alambana Pariksha. B. Shankaracharya actually refers to, and Gaudapada, he was Gaudapada's contemporary. He was a Vijnanavadi, means subjective idealist. So he was teaching in Nalanda University. So anyway, you can find many of these values which are found in Upanishads, for example. All these can be found in the Upanishads, which are much more ancient than Buddhism. So it seems that Buddhism itself took a lot of these great ideas from the Vedic text. After Buddha was a great Vedic scholar, and if you read Jataka tales, the rebirth stories, 543 life cycles of Buddha, all these characters, many of the characters are Vedic scholars. You may have noticed, if you read Buddhism, to get a picture of the social way of life, social life of Buddhist period, in Buddha's period, so to speak, you get a clear picture from the Jataka tales. The stories are mostly set in Benares, and the stories are most of the characters are recruited from the Vedic tradition. Buddha himself had so many lives, was born so many times as a king, a Hindu king, as a rishi, as a saint and sage and so on. And you find in all those Jataka tales, you find all these qualities are represented. Buddha himself, as he evolved from gradually in 543 life cycles, he himself was an embodiment of all these qualities that we are discussing just now. All this is for discussion. So it is true, all this apply to Buddhism also, you are right. Not only to Buddhism, but in a universal way, no one thinks of living a spiritual life or reading a spiritual book without some desire to look beyond this world of senses. Otherwise, should we waste time? Actually, so no one will think of wasting time to read a spiritual book unless he has some desire to look beyond the world of enjoyments. And that is the essence of Buddhism. More or less, that is also true of maybe Jewish tradition, early Christian tradition, if you read Desert Fathers and all that. So you can find that. If you read the Saint Anthony's, this early Christian saints, many of these qualities you find. Forbearance, for example, was an important quality they all had. And this austerity, kind of voluntary poverty, endurance, and then a sense of sanctity. All these are natural instincts for any spiritual seeker, which are of a universal nature. Your view is correct, because Shankaracharya lived in 8th century AD, and the last great Buddhist philosopher lived around 6th century AD, 200 years before Dharmapala. His disciples and his followers still living Shankara's time. So there must be some influence there, maybe. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Swamiji, I have a question in terms of the two terms that it seems to me maybe they are synonyms in Sanskrit, but you explain to me.
What's that?
Avidya and Vidya versus Nitya and Anitya. What
Or
are the
Nitya, Anitya,
differences?
yeah.
What are the differences with Vidya and Avidya?
Vidya, avidya.
Yes.
Oh, Vidya means knowledge. Avidya is its opposite. But again, these terms, which have got limited meaning in language and literature, they have profound implications in Vedanta. In Vedanta, these terms, these subjects become the object of discussion among many philosophers, Ramanuja, Madhva, Shankara, and so on. Vidya, Vidya. Vidya means knowledge, avidya means the opposite of knowledge. Now, Nitya means eternal, that remains the same without any change, the past, present, and future. The immortal, that's Nitya. Anitya is its opposite. So in Sanskrit, when the word a comes before a consonant, it becomes the opposite. Sukham, asukham. Nitya, anitya. Like that. And so and also when there is a, there is a vowel sound, then also when a comes, it becomes different. Okay. So, anishtam. Ishtam means what is likable. Anishtam. An plus ishtam. Anishtam is the opposite of ishtam. So, it's like, but Nitya, then it is a consonant. So, a comes. Anitya. An before a vowel and a before a consonant. So, that's the idea. Okay? Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Swamiji,
Yeah.
Pranam. I have a very simple question. You are mentioning that different characteristics of a spiritual seeker.
Yeah.
One who seeks the higher level beyond the mundane enjoyment should possess certain qualities, means certain characteristics.
Can be a little louder? Can be, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Hello. So, there is, you have mentioned certain characteristics and qualities of person who seeks spiritual knowledge beyond the mundane pleasures, enjoyment.
Yeah.
That is a necessity for those who want to pursue higher level of knowledge.
Yeah.
But not everybody can have that power or characteristics. People want to have, but there is a limitation on the part of few, like me. Means.
Now you won't be sitting there unless you have this strong spiritual desire to study higher philosophy. Why it's not? I don't. So you won't be sitting there listening. You can't even tolerate this discussion unless you have some spiritual inclination.
Inclination is there, but possessing the quality and graduating to that level, I'm finding it very. I've been coming, but according to me, I have not reached even the first level. How long it will take? I find that even Buddha was having 549 life cycles. And Hindu philosophy says liberation means liberation from the cycle of birth and death.
Yeah.
But Buddha himself took 540 births.
Yeah.
So that means people like me, how many times I have to be born to get liberated? That is my anxiety now.
Yeah, actually, in some of Buddha's life cycles, he was a student. He was listening to these ideas. So we don't know what life was it. But then the point is, no effort is ever wasted. No effort, no attempt is ever wasted. In spiritual life, even a casual interest. If you just listen to a lecture for a short time, if you go and read just one book for a short time and think seriously of what you have read, that itself will have a profound effect on our chittam, we call it our mental system. Because every good action, every attempt to practice meditation, to practice reading, to practice listening, all these will have some positive effect on the mind. Just like depositing a small amount in the bank, our spiritual bank balance. So that's why in spiritual life, this one principle, you are never late and no attempt is ever wasted. So very often, people ask this question, oh, Buddha took such a long time, so how much more time I may have to take? But really, you don't worry about it. Because the very fact that one could find time to come and listen to these higher ideas, which the discussion is no more related to mundane life, Still we could do that, we could bring ourselves to do that, shows that we have strong spiritual samskara. So that's a very important thing. In Vedanta, this is a very, very important principle. Not only Vedanta, Buddhism also. In Buddhist concept of the pratitya samutpada, the triple life cycles, this go on evolving. So no effort is ever wasted. This is a very important thing to understand. And even, not only even effort, even a desire, a mental desire to do something good, that also will produce a corresponding vritti in our mental system. At a physical level, unless we do something, the result will not be produced. At a mental level, suppose a person is poor, but he wants to help somebody. So, if only I could help somebody. That desire itself will have a positive effect on the mind system. Though no help is given, but when a desire to help somebody can be a positive spiritual sadhana. That's why you are never late and no effort is ever wasted. That's the idea. That's the uniqueness of Vedanta. Yeah. So we'll conclude now, and next week we'll meet again. We'll continue the discussion. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.